Many people and money experts believe all debt is bad and should be avoided or paid off quickly, or as quickly as possible. I'm in a different camp. I believe that debt is more nuanced and that there are specific types called good debts that can improve your finances by building wealth. This podcast will review the differences between good and bad debts, so you eliminate the bad ones and leverage the good ones to increase your net worth. I'll also review 5 steps for paying off the right debts faster, so you save money and create more financial security. Welcome back. I really appreciate you being with me on episode 924 of Money Girl. I'm your host, Laura Adams, an award-winning author, spokesperson, speaker, and founder of The Money Stack. That's my Substack newsletter. And of course, I'm the host of this podcast with over 44 million downloads. If you enjoy the free content we love creating for you here, take a moment to rate and review the show in your podcast app. And I'd love to hear if you're enjoying the show or maybe if it's helped you improve some aspect of your financial life. You can do that by leaving a review, calling 302-364-0308, or visiting my website, lauradadams.com. When you go there, you'll find an email contact page and more information about my work, books, and money courses. And of course, that's also where you can sign up for The Money Stack. You'll automatically receive my Money Success Toolkit with the exact templates that I use to manage my own money. They're a free gift. All right, so let's get into what I'm talking about when I say good debts. One way to know if a debt is good or bad is to ask yourself if it pays for something that appreciates or depreciates. If you use debt to finance an asset that should be worth more in the future or will allow you to earn more money in the future, it's typically a good debt. But debt that finances something that has already lost value or will be worth less in the future is a bad debt. A home mortgage is one of the most popular good debts. It's good because it allows you to purchase an asset that typically appreciates in value over time. While there's no guarantee that a home or investment property will be worth more in 5 or 10 years than today, real estate generally appreciates several percentage points annually on average. Plus, a limited amount of mortgage interest you pay to finance a primary or a second home is tax deductible. And that does include home equity lines of credit or HELOCs or home equity loans used to buy, build, or renovate a primary or a second home. Therefore, a mortgage costs less than its stated interest rate when you look at it on an after-tax basis. The combination of appreciation and tax benefits makes getting a mortgage for an affordable home one of the best possible debts you might have. But how much is an affordable home? You know, a good guideline is keeping your total housing cost, and that includes your mortgage, your property taxes, homeowners insurance, and any homeowners association dues, to no more than 25% of your gross monthly income. For example, let's say you earn $10,000 a month. Your housing expenses should ideally be no more than $2,500. Now, I've always targeted a lower amount for this. I've always targeted 20% or even 15% of my gross income for my maximum housing expense. I do that so I have plenty of financial breathing room and, I can achieve other goals that I want in addition to being a homeowner. But all of these targets are just guidelines. They're not hard rules. You have to set your own housing budget based on your needs, your total debt obligations, the lifestyle you want, and your financial goals. And of course, housing costs vary significantly depending on where you live. Spending 25% of your income on housing in expensive cities could be challenging. And that means you may need to cut back on other areas of your budget. Another example of a good debt is an education loan. While an education loan isn't backed by an asset like a mortgage is backed by a home, it can help you earn more over your lifetime. A college degree is required for many jobs and industries like healthcare, law, and engineering. So depending on the career you want, taking out a reasonable amount of education debt can make you more employable. Plus, a limited amount of interest paid on education loans is tax deductible. A good rule of thumb is to limit your federal or private student loans to your expected annual salary after graduation. For instance, let's say you believe you'll earn $100,000 in your first year as an attorney or a nurse. Consider borrowing no more than $100,000 for all of your education. All right, now let's talk about some examples of bad debts. As I mentioned, bad debts finance items that lose value. For example, a car loan allows you to buy a vehicle, which typically loses half its value within a few years. Of course, the depreciation rate depends on a vehicle's make and model and how well it's maintained. And while a car loan technically is a bad debt, most of us need vehicles. So you want to borrow as little as possible when you're buying a car. Maybe consider financing a used vehicle or buying new cars that hold their value over time. That would be, the wise way to handle an auto loan. Credit card balances are typically one of the worst debts you can have. But of course, it does depend on what you buy with credit cards. For instance, if you make charges that you can't pay in full for things like clothes, furniture, or restaurants, you don't have anything with real value. Plus, cards charge incredibly high interest rates. If you have a $1,500 balance on a competitive card that's charging 18%, and you can only make the minimum monthly payments, it would take you about 5 years to pay off. And in that situation, you'd pay almost $1,000 just for interest. And the stuff you bought on the card would probably be worth nothing or pennies on the dollar. So I hope I've made the point that good debts are good in the fact that you can leverage them to build wealth in the terms of appreciation or future income. But bad debts typically mean that you've purchased something that has no value. All right, so let's talk about 5 steps to create a debt payoff plan. Carrying too much debt for your income level is very harmful because it damages your credit scores and, maybe also your quality of life. So consider the following 5 steps for creating your debt elimination plan. Number 1 is to list out your debts. Knowing how much money you owe is the first step to paying it off. I know a lot of people who have no idea how much they owe or, what they're paying on those debts. So make a list of your debts, their interest rates, and the balances in a spreadsheet or on paper, just someplace where you can centralize all that information easily. Then identify which of your debts are good debts, like your mortgages, student loans, and low-rate auto loans. And identify your bad debts, like your credit cards, your high-rate personal loans, and any high-rate auto loans. The second step is to choose a debt payoff method. There are some popular debt payoff methods called the avalanche, snowball, and landslide methods. So let's go through those. With the debt avalanche, you pay off debts in order of the highest to the lowest interest rates. And this one is my favorite because it saves you the most in interest, and that may allow you to pay off your principal debt balances faster because you're saving more money. So again, you're starting with the debts that have the highest interest rate, working your way down to the debts with the lowest interest rate. Just like an avalanche goes from the top of the mountain, the highest point of the mountain, down to the lowest point. Another method is the debt snowball. This is when you pay off debts in order of the smallest to the largest balances. So it's an excellent method for anyone wanting to experience some small wins, just kind of eliminating a small debt and getting rid of it. So like a snowball, you're starting small and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And lastly, the landslide. This is when you pay off debts in order of the newest to the oldest. This method can help you improve your credit while you whittle down your debt. While these are some common strategies, there really isn't a right or wrong way to pay off debt. I'd say any method that you can use to make steady progress is a good one. However, as I said, I always recommend the avalanche method or starting with your highest rate debt, because if you plow your savings back into your debt balance, you can get out of debt faster. Plus, most people have multiple credit cards with pretty high rates. If so, you want to start with your most expensive credit card and then move to the next most expensive card or loan that you have. For instance, if you have a credit card charging 26% with a $6,000 balance and another card charging 20% with a $3,000 balance, I would tackle the larger balance first. So the one charging the higher percentage at 26% with the 6% balance. Getting rid of that first would save you the most in interest. Now, after you pay off all your bad debts, that's when you want to consider eliminating your good debts, unless you've got a better use for your money. For instance, if you can invest your money for a higher rate of return than a debt's after-tax interest rate, you're usually better off investing instead. All right, the third step is to pay more than the minimum. Now that you've created a game plan for your debt and you know which one to tackle first, it's time to throw everything you've got at that one debt while making minimum payments on your other debts. And then once you pay off the highest rate debt, you're going to take all that money that you sent to it and put it towards your next highest rate balance. Step 4 is to find ways to increase your cash flow. An excellent way to get out of debt faster is to increase your income, cut your expenses, or both. You might reduce spending on things like dining out, clothes, or subscription services. Also, you could save money by shopping for a cheaper car insurance policy, maybe getting a less expensive cell phone plan, less expensive internet, shopping those sorts of things that you're paying for regularly. Or maybe you could start a side hustle to earn more income to pay off debt. And of course, if you get a cash windfall, like a tax refund or a raise or a bonus at work or even a gift, you want to use that to accelerate your debt payoff plan. And the fifth strategy is to consider a debt consolidation. If you've got multiple credit cards or high-rate loans, a couple of consolidation strategies could drastically reduce or even eliminate your interest expense. For instance, a balance transfer credit card typically charges 0% interest during a promotional period. It could be something like 12 to 18 months. And during that period, you can cut your interest expense by paying off some or all of a high-rate debt with that 0% credit card. However, if you don't pay off your balance by the end of the card's promotion, your interest rate could end up being higher than what you were paying before you made the transfer. So you need to have a pretty set plan for paying off that balance before the promotion ends. Some other downsides for making a balance transfer are that you typically need good credit to qualify for a transfer offer, and you can only transfer an amount up to your qualifying credit limit. And you do have to pay a transfer fee, which typically ranges from 3 to 5% of any balances that you put on the card. Now, another option is getting a lower rate personal loan to pay off higher rate debt. Personal loans have monthly payments that depend on your chosen term, such as 3, 4, or 5 years. While a personal loan does not temporarily suspend your interest like a balance transfer offer, it does charge a relatively low fixed interest rate, and that makes it easier to include in your budget. However, the shorter your repayment term on a personal loan, the higher your monthly payments will be. So you need to make sure you can afford, a debt consolidation because the payments could be much higher than what you were paying, let's say, on a credit card. Paying off debt is a marathon, not a sprint. Your debt elimination journey should always begin with the bad debts, saving the good ones for last. And you should only pay off the best debts like mortgages if your savings and investments for retirement are in great shape and you have extra money to spare. I hope the show has given you some ideas about how to use debt to build wealth faster. That's all for now. I'll talk to you soon. Until then, here's to living a richer life. Money Girl is a quick and dirty tips podcast, and we've got a great team that works on the show each week. Steve Rickyberg audio engineers the podcast. Brandon Gacius is our director of podcast. Holly Hutchins is our digital operations specialist. Morgan Christensen is our advertising operations specialist. And Nathaniel Hoops is our marketing contractor.